Right, we're diving into some serious territory today, folks. Um, Kylian Mbappé, star athlete, facing some shocking allegations. It's a story that's, well, it's got everyone talking. It seems like every day there's a new twist and turn. So we're here to break it all down for you.
Yeah, the Mbappe situation, it's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. I mean, the speed at which this thing went global, it's crazy. One day, it's a quiet little recovery trip to Stockholm, and the next, boom, international scandal.
Like a runaway train, right? It all starts with Mbappe out there in Stockholm, recovering from an injury, keeping things low-key.
At least that was the idea.
Then, Aftonbladet, this Swedish newspaper, they dropped this bombshell report about a police investigation, an alleged rape at Mbappe's hotel.
And here's where it gets interesting, right? Their initial report, they dance around it a bit. They mention the investigation, but they don't directly name Mbappe.
Yeah, almost like they knew they were about to unleash a media firestorm.
Exactly. A calculated move, for sure. But then Mbappe himself, he goes on social media, and he doesn't hold back. He calls the report fake news, even goes so far as to suggest it's all connected to, get this, his legal battle with PSG, his former team.
It's like he's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. And suddenly this already complicated story just got a whole lot more complex.
Absolutely. You've got the seriousness of the allegations. Of course, Mbappe is going to come out swinging, denying everything. But then you've got this other layer, this potential for it to be a strategic move in this whole PSG saga.
A power play, you're saying?
Could be. We're talking big money, a whole lot of bad blood, it makes you wonder.
But wait, hold on, because things are about to get even more convoluted. Another Swedish publication, Expressen, they jump into the fray with this follow-up report. And this time, they're not holding back. They directly allege that Mbappe is the subject of this investigation, even citing sources who claim he's considered reasonably suspect.
Okay, now, reasonably suspect. That phrase, it carries a lot of weight, and it's often misinterpreted. It's important to understand that in the Swedish legal system, it's the lowest level of suspicion.
So not a smoking gun, more like...
More like they're looking into it. It means there might be something there, but it's way too early to draw any conclusions.
Right, and to be clear, the Swedish authorities, they've been very tight-lipped this whole time.
Oh, incredibly so, and that's very much by design.
They've confirmed that an investigation is ongoing, but they haven't uttered Mbappe's name once. It's all very hush-hush.
The Swedish legal system, they're all about protecting the integrity of their investigations. They're not about to try this case in the media. They take their time, they follow the evidence, and they don't jump to conclusions. It's about fairness, thoroughness.
It's like they're saying, we're going to do this by the book no matter who's involved.
Exactly. But Expressen, they did report that the police went to the hotel, collected evidence. They even listed some of the items, like clothing.
Okay, so they're treating this seriously, even if they're not naming names.
Absolutely. This isn't just a small-town scandal. We're talking about a global superstar. And the authorities are making it clear that they're not going to let Mbappe's celebrity status influence how they handle this.
So, no special treatment, just because he's Kylian Mbappe.
None whatsoever.
But of course, this story, it explodes, right? Headlines everywhere, social media's blowing up, everyone's got an opinion, everyone's an expert.
And that's the problem, isn't it? It's a feeding frenzy out there. We see this time and time again. A high-profile case, a whiff of scandal, and suddenly, it's a free-for-all.
Nuance goes out the window.
Completely. It's all about clicks, views, who can shout the loudest. And unfortunately, in all the noise, the really important voices, the ones calling for caution, for due process, they often get drowned out.
And that's what we're here to do, right? Cut through the noise, look at the facts, and try to make sense of this incredibly complex story as it unfolds.
It's a good reminder that we're not just dealing with headlines here, are we? We're talking about real people, real lives, and this whole thing, it's got some serious consequences.
Yeah, and let's not forget about that other elephant in the room, the PSG legal battle.
Oh, right.
We're talking about a whole lot of money here, some serious cash.
55 million euros to be exact.
55 million. I mean, that's not chump change, even for a superstar like Mbappe.
Not at all. It's a massive sum. And it really makes you wonder about the timing of all this, doesn't it?
Like, could this whole thing be some elaborate scheme to pressure him into dropping the lawsuit?
It's a question worth asking, for sure. And, you know, Aftonbladet, they were also the first to report that Mbappe and his crew were at a nightclub in Stockholm before the alleged incident.
Interesting. So they're painting a picture, trying to establish a timeline.
Exactly. They're not just throwing accusations around. They're building a narrative. And here's another piece of the puzzle. Aftonbladet, they also reported that the alleged victim, and I want to emphasize alleged here, she didn't go straight to the police.
Okay, so there's a delay in reporting. We've got the initial police report filed 2 days after the alleged incident, and now this.
Precisely. It's like each new detail adds another layer of complexity to this whole situation.
Yeah, it kind of makes you think about the pressure on everyone involved, right? I mean, imagine being in that situation, facing those kinds of accusations.
Absolutely. It's a lot to process, to say the least. And let's not forget, the Swedish authorities, they're notoriously tight-lipped, remember? They're all about protecting the integrity of the investigation above all else.
Right, so this silence, while it might be frustrating for some, it's actually a good thing.
In a way, yes. It means they're not swayed by public pressure, by the media frenzy. They're focused on the facts, on due process.
So they're basically saying, we're going to do this right, even if it takes time.
Exactly. They're not going to rush to judgment no matter who's involved.
Which is how it should be, right? But in the meantime, we've got Mbappe vehemently denying any wrongdoing, conflicting reports, anonymous sources, a media landscape that thrives on this kind of stuff. It's a lot to wade through. So how do we, as people who are just trying to make sense of it all, how do we navigate this?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, it all boils down to critical thinking. We can't just accept everything we hear at face value, especially in a situation like this where there's so much at stake.
So we can't just let our emotions dictate how we interpret the information.
Exactly. It's easy to get caught up in the emotion of it all, to jump to conclusions, but we need to take a step back, look at the evidence, or lack thereof, and be willing to admit when we just don't know something.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. But it's crucial, especially in the age of social media where misinformation spreads like wildfire.
So what's our first line of defense? How do we make sure we're not falling for clickbait and sensationalism?
It starts with being mindful of our sources. Who's telling us this information? What's their track record? Are they relying on verified facts or just throwing things out there based on hearsay?
Right, like that game we used to play as kids, telephone.
Exactly. The message gets distorted with every retelling. And that's why it's so important to go back to the source whenever possible, to look for evidence-based reporting, and to be wary of anything that feels overly sensationalized or designed to elicit a strong emotional response.
It's like trying to put together a puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing and others just don't quite fit.
A perfect analogy. And what makes this even more complicated is that we're not just talking about abstract concepts here. We're talking about real people's lives, their careers, their reputations.
Right. This isn't just a headline. It's Mbappe's life. A global icon at the top of his game, and suddenly he's facing these incredibly damaging allegations. It makes you think about the court of public opinion, how even an allegation can have a lasting impact.
Absolutely. And whether it's fair or not, that's the world we live in, isn't it? The speed at which information and misinformation spreads these days, it's unlike anything we've ever seen.
And it's hard to escape, even if you want to.
Yeah.
So as we try to wrap our heads around all of this, what are some of the key things we should be watching for as this story develops? What are the big questions we should be asking?
Well, the million-dollar question right now is, what will the Swedish authorities do next? I mean, will they formally name Mbappe as a suspect?
And if they do, what happens then?
Well, that's when things could get really interesting, legally speaking. We could be talking about a legal battle that spans continents, international law, extradition treaties.
Wow, it's like something out of a movie.
It really is. And then there's the whole question of Mbappe's sponsors.
Right. They must be watching this whole thing unfold with bated breath.
Oh, absolutely. They've got a lot riding on this, too. Do they stick with him? Do they distance themselves? It's a tough call.
A high-stakes game for everyone involved. It seems like this whole situation is a powder keg, and we're all just waiting to see who lights the fuse. But I think one of the biggest takeaways here, and something we've been circling back to throughout this deep dive, is the importance of nuance.
Couldn't agree more. It's so easy to get caught up in the black and white, the guilty or innocent. But the truth is, most of life is lived in the gray areas.
And those gray areas, they're uncomfortable, aren't they?
They can be, for sure. But they're also where we do our best thinking, where we challenge our assumptions, where we learn and grow.
And that's really what we've tried to do today, to approach this incredibly complex and sensitive situation with a critical eye, to ask tough questions, and to remind ourselves that there's always more to the story than what meets the eye.
Well said. And as this story continues to unfold, it's going to be more important than ever to approach it with that same critical eye, to resist the urge to jump to conclusions, and to remember that everyone involved deserves to be treated with fairness and respect.
And on that note, we'll leave it there for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, folks. Remember, keep those critical thinking caps on, and we'll catch you next time.